I'm here today with Rachel Cruze, a New York Times bestselling author and the brand new author of Know Yourself, Know Your Money. You even have your own show. Rachel, thanks for being with
Yeah,
us.
Joy, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We just talked about off camera how we're both working moms. How on earth do you do all these things and write a book in a pandemic? Like, how did that even happen?
No, that's funny because that book I wrote before when I was pregnant with my third. Because I
Wow.
knew he was going to be an October baby. So I was like, okay, I want the manuscript done so I can enjoy maternity leave. That was like my big
Yes.
goal. It's like, I want nothing to do on maternity leave. So I
Uh-huh.
wrote this all pre-COVID. I mean, I wrote it and finished like October 1 and went along my merry way. And then I did all the edits in COVID. And honestly, it was so funny because I'm like, not that things change because the principles are the same, whether it's a pandemic or not. But even
Mhm.
my viewpoint and even how I handled money through the pandemic, all of it, it just brought this whole new element. So I even added some stuff in it.
Yes.
So it was a wild time.
I think I've seen this time and time again that it seems like people who've been working on things and then they were released in the pandemic, that the timing, God kind of worked it out to be perfect. And I can't imagine a better book for right now. I mean, even the title alone made me want to pick it up because I know that you're a part of Ramsey Solutions and you guys talk a lot about how to handle money, but you don't talk a lot about why. So can you tell me where this idea came from?
Yes, well, probably, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, I was kind of on this like personal journey. No big thing happened. I just found myself, I remember I read the book, The Birth Order, because I'm a middle child. So I was
Ooh,
like, I want to know how my birth order and
I
family
didn't even
affected
know
me.
about
I
that.
was in some counseling. I took the Enneagram, like all these
What
like,
number are you, girl?
oh, I'm a 3. I
Okay.
really want to be a 7. Are you a 7?
No, I'm a 6, but I can
Okay.
wing 7, thank God sometimes. But girl, that affects everything,
Yes,
right?
so I was just like all of these different things about 4 years ago just kind of hit, and I was like having all this self-awareness that I had never had,
Mhm.
and not that I have
Yeah.
arrived, but I remember thinking, okay, I'm a better wife. Like I know questions to ask
Mhm.
myself more than I ever have. Same with motherhood, same with working. I mean,
That's
all of
good
this.
to
It just
know.
kind of, I don't know, rerouted all this stuff in my head. So then in the middle of it, I was thinking, okay, so how does this affect my money? And it was like I
Mhm.
went down this black hole, is what I joke, because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all
Yes.
this stuff here of why we handle money the way we do. Everything from
Yeah.
right, our fears to our how we grew up with money, I mean, all of it. And I was like, why? For 10 years, I've been talking about how to
Yes.
budget, how to get out of debt, how, which is all really important. But personal
Mhm.
finance is 80% behavior. It's
Wow.
only 20% head knowledge. So you can know what to do, but actually doing it is where you're going to see progress. And I thought, okay, well, what's affecting us from doing this stuff? And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, it's so much more than, oh, I'm not good at a budget. I'm like, no, there is
Why are you not
so much
good
there,
at
the
a
why. And if
budget?
you can get that why, oh, it changes your money
Yes.
habits.
I think one of the best things in the book that I was obsessed with, you talk about the way that you're raised, because we all know that has so much to do with the way we spend money. And you call them money classrooms. And you can give a quick overview on that. And then I would love to talk about, I think I know which money classroom I'm in, and I would love to talk about it. So will you
Oh, I
tell us a little
love
bit
that.
about it?
Yes. Well, money's really communicated in two ways in a household. It's communicated verbally, what you hear, but it's also communicated emotionally. So
Mhm.
when I was writing the manuscript, I was like, okay, so I like made these two and I was like, oh God, you gave me a graph. Like there's a
Love a
quadrant.
clean graph.
There's a
Yes.
quadrant and I can take this and run. And so, yeah, I created these 4 money classrooms. So the first is the
Mhm.
anxious money classroom, and it's where it's verbally closed and emotionally stressed. So it's
Mhm.
not talked about, but the emotions, you felt the tension around money. You never could
Mhm.
pinpoint why, but man, it was there.
Mhm.
Classroom 2 is the unstable money classroom, and this is where it's
Mhm.
verbally open but emotionally stressed. So
Yes.
lots of conflict, lots of fighting. Probably heard the same money fight over and over and
Oh.
over from your parents. So that's the conflict. And then classroom 3 is the unaware money classroom, and this is where it's
Yeah.
verbally closed but emotionally calm. So I always say this one's like your head was in the sand. You were probably the kid that
Yeah.
went off on your own at 18 or 21 and thought, I have no clue how money works. Like no one ever
And
taught
it can
me.
seem really healthy that way, but then you don't have any tools.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Mhm.
And then classroom 4 is definitely the healthiest, and it's where it's verbally open and emotionally calm. And this is the secure money classroom.
So that's where we all wanna get, right? Like, and I just became a mom, so I'm really thinking about this in the terms of what am I cultivating in my house? Because I think I was in the first money classroom that we didn't really talk about money, but at the same time, my dad was in ministry and there wasn't a lot of it, so there was, like, a tension that I could feel, but it wasn't really, I mean, they thought that was the best, not to say there isn't enough money for the bill here at the end of the month, and God always provided for us, but I am so curious, like, what your thoughts are about how do you move from one money classroom to the next one?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because some people will just mirror what their parents did, right? It's like that's all
Yeah.
they know, so they just do that. And then other people have this visceral reaction where it's the complete opposite, right? Like I'll talk to someone, they're like, "Oh no, 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 no! I knew there was tension, but yeah, no, I will forever talk about it. Like, even if it feels
Yes.
stressful, it's gonna be less stressful if it's just said out loud, you know. So I
Mhm.
find that a lot. So yeah,
'Cause you could move to another unhealthy money
that's right.
classroom.
That's right. And then
Yeah.
the other thing too is, even if you talk to your siblings, do you have siblings? I'm
Mhm.
guessing
3
yes.
brothers, yeah.
So they each may say, "Oh no, I feel like I grew up in three. I never felt the tension." You know, so even between
Wow.
siblings, it's really how you perceived
Interpret
and
it.
yes, what was going on. So the
Wow.
biggest thing I think for on the verbal side is learn just to talk about it. And money can be really difficult to talk about. I think a lot of parents, like you said, try to protect their kids because they think, okay, if money is tight, I'm not going to put the weight of the world on my 5-year-old. So I
Yeah.
always say share, but don't scare. Right?
Okay.
There's an appropriate time to talk about things specifically,
Yeah.
but talk to them. Talk about giving savings meeting. It doesn't have to be about numbers specifically, but learning to have the conversation, whether it's with your kids, with your spouse, with a good friend if you're single, like whatever
Mhm.
it is, talk about it.
Yeah.
And then the emotional side, I think that really it can be a calm environment when money is controlled, and that's how the how tos come into
Mhm.
play. When you really do live on a budget, when you really don't owe half your income in debt payments, because that means you actually
Mm.
have money and you have margin.
Yes.
When you actually save money and have a rainy day fund, like all of those things
Mhm.
really bring that emotion from stressed and
Yeah.
freaked out to that calm, okay, controlled feeling, which is
Yeah.
important.
I love all the examples that you're giving because, I mean, you grew up in a household where I'm sure it was like talked about in a healthy way. I know your parents went through some crazy stuff. At what age do you feel like you started to understand money? And at what age, like, what's a good age to start talking about money principles? How was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I was born the year my parents filed for bankruptcy. So they always laugh and say like the first
Wow.
5 years of my life, it was survival mode. They're like, "Oh, we didn't care if y'all learned anything." Like we were like literally just
We had
trying.
to feed
Yeah,
you.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Food just had to be on the table. Like learning
Yes.
great principles about contentment can come later. Like no,
Yeah,
we're going to
not
actually
now.
give you food.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like mom and dad, one great thing is I don't even know if I could answer that. Like I remember being like
Mm.
elementary school and having to do chores. Like we were never given an allowance. We were always on commission. So like you work, you
Wait,
get paid.
what does that mean?
I know.
Do you earn things? You're on commission.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're never given money as Ramsey. Like
Oh,
yeah, you had to
wow.
work. Like
That makes
if you
so
want,
much
if you
sense.
want money, you got to do it. So I learned. I think those kind of things as a kid were definitely real.
Mhm.
But even there was never a big like money summit every year that they
Yeah.
sat down and talked about money. It was really in
Mhm.
the ebb and flow of life. And so that's one thing I
How
always
you live.
encourage parents. Yes, is number one, more is caught than taught. Your kids are watching you, but
Yeah.
also it's like when you're at the grocery store, right? Just say, hey, FYI, there's a brand of cereal that you can buy that's more expensive than the off brand. Like those, it's like it's even though it sounds so insignificant,
It's
bringing them
important.
into life when it comes to money and how to deal with
Yeah.
it is important.
That is so it's so much simpler, I think, than we make it. When there's things that happen in your mind that you can invite your family into. That's so smart. And something that fascinated me about this is thinking about the marriage dynamic. I mean, you talk a little bit in the book about you and your husband Winston, and you're gonna marry someone who's probably in a different money classroom than you are. How do you, once you start to learn about how you handle money, how do you come together with someone who handles it differently?
Yeah, well, this is where the tendencies I think really play in. There's 7
Yeah.
money tendencies that I write about in the book.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's a big part of saying, okay, this is how you're wired. And not, there's not always a right or a wrong with your
Mhm.
personality when it comes to money. And that's one thing in that section. I
Yeah.
didn't want that shame and guilt of like, this is right, this is wrong. So, like, one tendency is saver versus spender. And a lot of people think
Yes.
the savers are just right all the time. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're not. Because I'm a natural spender. I'm like, being a natural spender is not a bad thing. It's not wrong.
Yes.
But again, if it goes to the extremes on both ends, that's really
Mhm.
unhealthy, right? Like the savers
Yes.
can tend to grab on and hoard. And scripture is clear, don't
Absolutely.
build bigger barns, but savers can tend to do that.
Yes.
They just want to close those
For
fists.
a rainy day, you just wanna keep it.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Create
and it
false
becomes
security.
that's right,
Mhm.
exactly.
That's me.
But the spenders like me, I could spend everything I make. And yeah, I'm always
Think
like, let's
nothing
just
of
cash
it.
out the 401k and go on a great vacation.
Yes.
Not really, not really. But
You're
I
like, "You have me." Oh,
I
that's bad?
I can
Okay.
spend. I can spend. So I have to learn to save, right? Because
Yes.
scripture is clear. In the house of the wise, there's choice of food and oil, but a foolish man devours
Mhm.
all he has. Like it's wise to save. So it's that
Okay.
medium ground. So I think for spouses to say, hey, you may be more scarcity minded or abundance minded. You may be more of a
Yeah.
saver or a spender. You may like to spend money on experiences. I like to spend money on things. Like you could go
Yep.
down the list. And again, not a right or
Mhm.
wrong, but understanding and having empathy of, hey, he's coming at it like that. I'm coming at it like this. It almost just removes the tension around money. Like if you can just
Yes.
name it and say, okay, we're seeing it a little differently. How do we now work together? Because I think with money,
Mhm.
with married couples, I always like visualize it. It's like money sits in between you guys
It
and it
really
becomes
does.
that wedge where I'm like, no, 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 money's not the problem. Put it over here because a lot of life and marriage problems come out as money problems, but they're not money
Ooh.
problems. So like,
That's so good, and they say money's, like, one of the top reasons for divorce,
yes, it
but you're
is.
saying that's just the way that
It's
you
a
spend your
symptom.
money.
It's a
It's a
symptom of
symptom.
other issues. So
Wow.
whether it's communication, whether it's different value system, whatever it
Mhm.
is, yeah, getting on the same page. But then tactically, joy, budgeting together, like that's a very tactical answer, but it's true. When you can
Yes.
sit down as a married couple once a month and say, hey, here's what we're going to make this month. Here's how much we're going to give. Here's how much we're
Mhm.
going to spend. Here's how much we're going to save. This is specifically what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, that changes the game.
And, okay, can you talk to me tangibly about that? Because that's something my husband and I are terrible at. We're always like, "We're gonna have a money meeting next week," and then we're like, "Could we just watch a show?" Like, we don't
I
want
know.
to do
The
it.
Bachelor, it's a new season.
Yes.
We'll just
Girl, yes. But neither one of us are, excited. Neither one of us are the nerd and excited about the finances. So, how do you get into that habit together? Do you kind of appoint one person to be like, "You're the one who's in charge of getting us to do this every month?" Because, like, I know the budget's one of the most important things, but maybe you're listening to this and you're like, "I don't like to do a budget either." Where do you start?
I'd say I'm like you. I'm the one in the relationship. I actually don't like doing the budget as much as Winston, which
It's
is
not
so funny.
fun.
Oh, I know. But that's what I used to think. I really, a budget for me for so long, I was like, oh, I just feel like it limits my freedom. It limits the ability of
Mhm.
fun I can have. But I had the switch a few years ago. I was like, no, a budget doesn't limit my freedom. A budget gives me freedom. It
Mm.
actually gives me permission to spend. So now when I am on Amazon or jcrew.com or whatever I am spending my
Mhm.
money, there is freedom because I know I can spend this amount
And that's no
and it's
problem.
fine. Like, I don't have this
Yeah.
guilt or I'm not questioning. So there's a level of freedom that the budget does have. So I would say for couples, I want you
Mhm.
to really work as a team. So I would say if one is naturally more excited or more
Mhm.
gifted in the
We're
numbers,
gonna have to rock, paper,
let
scissors
them,
that.
yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah, have that person do it. But
Okay.
but what tends to happen is people will
Mhm.
yield, especially people that grew up in classroom 3, the unaware money classroom.
Ooh.
They'll tend to say, "Well, money was never an issue for me." And if their spouse is really good at it, they're like, "Oh no, I'll just let him do it. I'll just
And
let
they
her do it
won't
because I
know
don't need to check. I don't
anything?
want to check in. Yeah, I'm good." And the other spouse just handles everything. And I'm like, "No, red flag. You both want to be there. Look at the
Yeah.
numbers together. But the one that enjoys it can create it
Okay.
and bring it. And
Yeah.
then together you talk about
And
it.
then you become partners in the
That's right.
utilization of
Yes,
it. That's
yes.
so
Yeah. The
good.
team aspect, it is so important.
Mhm.
Like my husband and I, we built a house. We moved in last year.
Yes. Oh, it's
And it was
great.
like a year and a half process, but we had been saving for so many years before that. It was like a
Mhm.
huge goal for us. And I'll tell you, when we moved in that day, we both looked at each other. I was like, Winston, like moving into this new house is so fun. I mean, it was
Oh,
so exciting.
yeah.
But the fact that we accomplished that goal together, I mean, there were some months I was like, oh
Mm.
my gosh, because we had a savings goal every month. And some months I was
Yes.
like, I don't know if we're gonna hit it. But like we did it. And honestly, when you accomplish a goal together, there's a level of unity
Mhm.
that's created. There's
Wow.
something about the journey of working together that
For a goal.
betters your marriage. And I hear people say that all the time, like as people are getting out of debt or they're budgeting and they're working together,
Mhm.
they're like, man, my marriage is better. I'm like, you didn't do a marriage, I didn't write a marriage
Wow.
book or like, you didn't do marriage principles, but there's something beautiful about
Mm.
coming that unity that's created. And in America today, oh, it's like my pet peeve. I won't get on this tangent, but there's like this level of independence people have. No, it's my checking. I have my money. He has his
Yes.
money. And we
And
run
there's
on
red
two,
flags
we run
there.
on two separate tracks. I'm like, no, you're missing so many amazing opportunities as a team to work together. Even though it may cause some conflict,
Mhm.
it can be really vulnerable, there can be
Yes.
tension, but pushing through all of those creates a stronger marriage. So
Mm.
so overall, it's I'm huge on it.
That was such a good answer because I think we talk so often about how money's so dangerous for a marriage, but nobody's talking about how beneficial it can be. And I'm so grateful for you to show the other side of that. And I'm grateful that this book came out now because there is so much fear around finances in the midst of this pandemic. So many people are like, I never expected to be without my job and I'm not, or I never expected to go bankrupt or for my business to fall through. And so you talk about fears a lot in the book. There's so many different money fears. Can you just speak to what it looks like to try to know yourself, know your money, apply the principles in this time?
Yes, well, this is, gosh, 2020 was like you said. I'm like, there was obviously the health scare, but the financial scare was as real. I mean,
Just as
people,
real.
yeah, losing jobs and being furloughed, all of this. And so I talked to Dr. Chip Dodd. He wrote the book Voice of the Heart about this section because I love what he
Wow.
says about fear. He said fear can actually be seen as a gift. Fear is your
Mm.
body's literal response that you are in need of something. So when
Hmm.
that fear rises up, I say in the book, listen to it. That money fear. What are you fearful of? Now, I don't want it to go paralyzing. I don't want it to turn into anxiety. Oh, that is unhealthy fear. Like, no, no, no. But when that
Healthy to a point.
that's right. Yes, but when that little, that anxiety kind of pops up for just a quick second, okay, name it. What is it? Because one of the
Mm.
biggest fears I see specifically with women is the fear of financial security. And
Yes.
it's, if something happens, are we going to be okay? And for a lot of Americans, that was their reality in 2020. I mean,
Yes.
40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency in cash.
Yes, and that's,
So,
like, so new for so many
yes, and
people.
if you lose a job, you can, yeah, that
What
would be
then?
scary. Do you know what I'm saying? So that fear is
Yes.
real. So when you say that, then use that fear as a tool to say, what can I put in place so that that's not my reality? Okay, we probably need to
Mhm.
save. We need some money in the bank.
Yes.
Maybe this forces you to say, you know what, I'm done having debt. I'm done owing people money because it allows, that's a
Mhm.
level of risk that you have in your personal finances. But when that's eliminated,
Yeah.
there's a freedom there. So like it may force you into actually great money habits. And I don't think
Wow.
pain and fear has to be your only teacher,
Mhm.
but it is a thorough teacher, right? So like if there's a reality of like, oh gosh, I'm not good at this,
Yeah.
then yeah, listen to it and let that lead you to better money habits.
That is something that you say that the only way, because obviously we want to talk about once we know ourselves, how do we change our money habits? And you say only like difficult uncomfortableness makes us change. Obviously, we're creatures who don't want to change. And while this is a scary season, it's a season of discomfort in finances. And so, what does somebody do if they're like, well, I can't even think about saving right now. I can't even think about those things. Like, what's a good place to just like start step one if you're struggling?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the very first step is kind of what you touched on, but it's true. You have to understand that if you're going to get a different outcome with your money
Mhm.
than what you have today, like if you sit here today and you say, I do not like where I am, right? I am living
Mhm.
paycheck to paycheck. I am stressed every month to make the bills. If I do lose a job, I have no clue how my bills are going to be paid next month. Like
Yeah.
if that's you, then you can't keep doing the same thing over and over
Can't stay
again.
there.
No. So,
Mm-mm.
and those habits that brought you there are going to have to change, but change is uncomfortable. It's painful. It's not fun. And so it's going to be hard. Like there's going to be a
Mhm.
level there. I'm doing something new. And like you said, we're all comfortable. I switched the car seats in my van a few weeks ago because I took them out to clean. And I switched my infant car seat with my 3-year-old's toddler
Oh,
seat. And we were like
no.
loading back in the next day and she would not get in the seat. She's like, this is not my side of the
I
car,
don't
mom.
sit on this
Yeah,
side.
yeah. She's like, this is not my side of the car. I was like, Caroline, get in the seat. We got to go to preschool.
It takes so
And
long to
she,
install a car seat
yeah,
too, I
oh,
know that.
I was like, yeah. I'm like, no, we're not redoing
We
this.
can't.
But I thought in that moment, I'm like, even at 3 years old, it's uncomfortable to sit on the
Mhm.
other side of the van. Like, I get it. I totally get it.
Mhm.
No one likes it. But you have to know something's got to change if you want a different outcome. So that's number
Yes.
one. Honestly, number two is I would say the budget. Sit down and actually do a budget.
Mhm.
And I use the app Every Dollar. So you can download
Okay.
that. It's free, but just to say, okay, here's like the actual money. Here's
Yeah.
the dollars and cents of what's coming in next month. Here are
Mhm.
all my bills. List it out, see it
Yeah.
all.
Sometimes that's the scariest part is to really face like what is essential in here and what's not. And you're like afraid that there's just not going to be enough, but you have to face it. I'm sure it's like this scary unknown like lion. You're like, you have to tame it. You
That's it.
have
That's
to.
it. Yeah. And honestly, too, when I talk to people like that,
Mhm.
it's usually not as bad as they think.
Okay,
It's
good.
almost like the avoidance of it, the anxiety of
Mhm.
that has built up so much. So when you actually look at it, you're like, okay, that's my rent. I can do that. Okay, I may have to
Yes.
cut back some on food this month, but we can do that. Like you start to
Yes.
actually get a tangible grip because you start to get control. For the
Mm.
first time ever, your money's not controlling you. You're actually controlling it. So that budget is a
Wow.
big first step. And then we have a plan called the 7 baby steps that kind of walks
Mhm.
you through it. So honestly, I would encourage anyone, you can just Google it. It's free, it's
Yeah.
online, whatever. But to start really
Yeah.
walking this process and this plan, because having
Mhm.
something that you can shoot for, goals that you know this is exactly what I needed to be doing, gives
Mhm.
you a level of peace and instruction.
Yes, I've actually lived that. I got a chance to do my debt-free scream
Oh, that's
on
right. Yes, I
on,
love it.
Dave Ramsey's show, and it was, like, so, like, incredible, and I did that right before I got married because I didn't wanna go into a marriage with all of my car debt, my school debt, all of this stuff, and it was so liberating, and it's not like I've handled money flawlessly since. Getting married is its own challenge, but there is so much freedom in starting to handle that, and so if you had, like, one word of wisdom to leave with somebody, maybe even something we didn't touch on that you think is important about the book, is there anything we missed about why it's important to, like, know yourself when it comes to finances?
Gosh, I would say when you can get to those root issues, right? So whether it is that
Mm,
fear, whether it is maybe discontentment, whatever that heart root issue is that's causing you to handle
mhm.
money the way you do, getting to that place, I think unleashes not just the money part of your life, but I think it releases a
Mhm.
level to say of surrender too. Like when you
Yes.
have this awareness of wow, I don't know, it's kind of like going to the foot of the cross constantly where you're like,
Yes.
wow, I really am screwed up. Like really are so many things and I'm like, golly, there's just a beauty of humility that is shown to know
Mm.
I don't have it all, right? Like he ultimately is my answer. He's the ultimate of all of this beyond
Yes.
money. But when I can go there and humbly say, wow, I really may want to do something different or work on this part of myself. It's a beauty of healing as well in the
Yes.
process. So it's more than just money for me in this message. It's so much more than, yeah, the level of humility and finding yourself is key.
And I think that's important because when you start to dig into who you are, I mean, I started to see myself in this book and I'm like, I don't show enough grace when like somebody in my life doesn't spend money properly and all these different things that I'm like, oh, yeah, I am kind of screwed up. And but you don't have to stay there. The fact that you go and God has grace to cover this and I don't have to stay there.
That's
And
exactly
it's a
right.
beautiful way to handle it. Thank you for sharing this message with us and for writing this book, Rachel. You can get Know Yourself, Know Your Money right now.
Thanks,
Thank
Joy.
you.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.